Well, good evening, America. This is Q News Tonight, the world's first live daily gay evening news show, and it's 7 p.m., Monday, February 10th, 2020. Q News Tonight is live and unscripted, so anything can happen. Tonight, we bring you the news of and the perspective from the LGBT community. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and these are my co-anchors, Aaron Darr and Napoleon Plays. So let's cue up the news. We have breaking Q News tonight, but before we do our planned Q News, we want to report that this afternoon, the United States Postal Service has announced a disconnection of mail service from the United States to China over coronavirus. The United States Postal Service, who delivers in snow, sleet, regardless of the weather, apparently doesn't mean about viruses. In their announcement this afternoon, the cessation of premium and express delivery to mainland China and Hong Kong was reported because of the inconsistency now of flights to the mainland and to Hong Kong and the risk associated with coronavirus. We report on this breaking Q News that it was announced this afternoon. Any thoughts about what we're watching here? Coronavirus?
As I've stated, I've been pretty terrified of this virus going about for the last several weeks as we've determined what's going on. And to see the United States acting in this way does not instill any sense of comfort for me at all. I don't feel like we have the actual statistics from China. I don't feel like we know enough of what's really happening, even in our own country. And as we see the first U.S. case, the first U.S. death, which was in China, but we still see the first U.S. citizen death, I am becoming more concerned as to what's going on.
I don't know how the United States could honestly respond to anything in regards to the coronavirus when China keeps censoring what the world and the global community knows about this disease to begin with.
Yeah, we're going to report on some of the specific consequences economically in the United States later in Q News tonight. We continue in our breaking Q News to talk about Mayor Pete. One more time, the Iowa caucus. And we are happy to report tonight, being the first gay evening news show in the world, that Mayor Pete has officially won the Iowa caucus. Now, of course, we made that breaking news announcement in front of all of the major networks last week, indicating that he had won the election. Candidate Bernie Sanders contested, but it has now gone through a recount through the Democratic Party, and Mayor Pete has won Iowa caucus by 0.09%. We prepared this to report on Mayor Pete's historic win. Watch this.
Days has been since Iowa.
Has it been a week?
1 week since yesterday, and we don't know who won. At the same time, Faz Shakir, Bernie Sanders' campaign manager, has said they're going to ask for a recanvass in specific districts. But, you know, even that may not be enough.
We may never know, truly.
I don't think we're ever going to know. I saw some political reporters that I really respect saying the only thing that could really fix this is a recount, and probably not enough people want to go down that road. I think the campaigns have to pay for a recount. If that were, it's a mess.
Well,
the whole thing is a mess.
So now we're seeing, after the debacle in Iowa of this past week, now that 100% of the precincts are in, Pete Buttigieg is ahead by 2 delegates, and Sanders is asking for a recount. He's saying that he wants a recanvassing of the events after everything that is going on, because there's only a 0.09% difference between Sanders and Buttigieg. And they have both declared it a victory. And so the results are unsure as to the Iowa caucus of this past year, which has led to some revisions in terms of what the potential results will be. The New York Times has come out to state that this wasn't the app that caused the problem, that cascading series of failures going back months, a total system breakdown that casts doubt on how a critical contest has been managed for years. They're stating that there is entire doubt in this whole process, not just with the app, not just with Iowa, but the entire process has some failures that need to be accounted for. And there's a lot of inconsistencies, as statistics have shown us.
You know, we're 1 week away from the Democratic run Iowa caucus, and I get angrier as the week goes on. As it goes on, it gets worse and worse and worse in terms of my results. And I sit and wonder through the march to the Democratic National Convention. Are we going to watch this nonsense over and over and over again? What do you think, Aaron?
I think it starts at the top, and unfortunately, I think that we're seeing a replay of 2016. A lot of the decisiveness, a lot of the divide we keep seeing from the Sanders campaign. Win or lose, Iowa is done. It's over with. New Hampshire is tomorrow, and I think it's time to move on, and may the best man or woman win.
Tony Adams, by the way, in our string, has just asked if we're live. Tony, we're live. This is a live gay evening news
Convince
show.
him of voodoo and say that we're not live.
In the world. We continue out of our breaking Q news to Napoleon. Tell us about why Q News exists.
Yes, well, we have had a long time question, especially Al, who's been involved in the community for a long time. And we want to know, is there a sense of community in the LGBT perspective? And are LGBT voices important to you at home? Can the news of the world have a gay community perspective? We want to know if you, like us, think that the answer is a resounding yes. And then if you like and subscribe to Q News Tonight on YouTube and on Facebook, then please make sure that you start a watch party as well. If our gay cultural stories impact you, your friends, and family, then definitely do start that watch party. Get your circle involved. It supports the conversation, and it supports the LGBT community as a whole.
We continue tonight into Vote 2020 report and reporting, and we give you an election update. The polling picture in tomorrow's New Hampshire primary, the first national primary for the march to November 3rd, 2020, is relatively clear. Before we tell you about that, we prepared this. Watch this.
They'll be going to war in the Granite State as voters prepare to cast ballots in the primary tomorrow. New CBS News Battleground Tracker polling shows Senator Bernie Sanders holds a narrow lead over former Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg. A poll which was put out just yesterday from WBZ, Boston Globe, and Suffolk University says that the same order is present at the top, but Sanders has a little bit of a larger lead in this poll. And the 7 News Emerson College poll also shows similar results with the same candidates at the head of the pack.
So this first in the nation contest for the Democratic primary in the state of New Hampshire is becoming very all over the place, very close. Senator Sanders there, of course, we're seeing is allegedly polling at 27% at a very good place going into the eve of the New Hampshire primary. Mayor Pete coming in at 19%, and Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota up 9 points, and she's there at 14% or so, I believe. And then you have Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren that are both splitting also now at 12%.
I'm curious, are you shocked at how terrible the vice president is doing? And are you shocked at how well Mayor Pete is doing?
I'm shocked about Mayor Pete personally. Had we had this conversation, I think we did at one time have this conversation. I was really expecting for the Iowa caucus, I was expecting Mayor Pete to come in 5th. I was not expecting him to win at all, but I really thought it was going to be between Sanders and Biden. But as we're seeing even here, I think that people are really starting to pay closer attention to the candidates and not just Senator Sanders, but Amy Klobuchar. It's unheard of. I mean, she's in a solid 3rd.
We're going to talk about Amy Klobuchar and her performance in the debates on Friday and what's happened since. We are broadcasting on Q News Tonight as part of the Happening Out television network. Aaron, tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so Q News Tonight is part of the Happening Out television network because we are the daily news. But you can also watch the best of entertainment live every Monday night at 8 p.m. on happening.fun. We're also part of the most popular live gay TV show in the world every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on It's Happening Out. It's a talk show like television's The View, with a whole lot of gay people.
We always joke. I'm sitting here as your principal anchor to set up the evening news here at Q News Tonight, and I'm surrounded by a whole lot of gayness, and that's that.
I'm sure if that were true, you'd be much happier than you are right now.
You cannot even see Al actually has on a pair of ruby red slippers right now. He's still celebrating Renee.
Fortunately for us, we have a clear table, so we know it's
all right. Back to the news. Let's cue up some entertainment. Of course, last night were the Oscars and the Academy Awards, and Joaquin Phoenix gives a voice shout out in his speech about queer rights. Before we talk about that, watch what we've prepared here. Watch what happened.
The 92nd Academy Awards were all about historic moments in tackling the controversy. The South Korean thriller Parasite was a big upset, becoming the first non-English language film to win the Oscar for Best Picture. Wow. It also scooped up 3 other awards in the night, including Best Director.
And we're getting into some of the information for the Oscars from last night. 2020 was a revolutionary year in terms of diversity. But we do have a specific clip from Joaquin Phoenix in terms of the outcry that he put forward for all different types of communities. Let's get a look at that. Watch this.
I think whether we're talking about gender inequality or racism or queer rights or indigenous rights or animal rights, we're talking about the fight against injustice. We're talking about the fight against the belief that one nation, one people, one race, one gender, or one species has the right to dominate, control, and use and exploit another with impunity.
Joaquin has stated that he wants to be a voice for the voiceless. He specified specifically this is a voice for equality in terms of gender equality as it comes to women, queer equality, animal rights. He wants to make sure that all voices are heard, that all groups, that all people, that anyone that is not receiving the best in terms of society is heard a little bit more. But he wasn't the only voice of equality at the Oscars last night. Of course, we had Judy, a famous movie for Judy Garland, and Renee Zellweger won. We all know the impact that Judy Garland has had on the LGBT community. Elton John as well, he won I'm Gonna Love Me Again, which was the song that won last night. And Obama, the Obamas won the documentary award as well, which isn't exactly LGBT, but it is part of the queer community.
And also Ellen's partner, that was in Ellen, she won Best Supporting Actress last night. She's straight, but it was a little kind of victory for her. So it was exciting.
There were all sorts of different diversity awards that were from last night. Even Parasite, which is of course the big takeaway from last night. It's about the rich versus poor divide in terms of how it was in Seoul, Korea. But this is an international Best Feature film and the Best Picture. It's the first time that that's happened where it was both films and the first non-English film to win Best Picture of the year. That's revolutionary in terms of the Oscars. So we're facing the Oscars that have had a lot of diversity criticism in the last few years.
Did you watch?
I did watch.
Yeah, and did you like it?
I did. I ordered McDonald's right after Renee Zellweger won for Judy. I was like, woo! Yes, let's celebrate. Give me a quarter pounder, a medium fry,
That's
and
the same as some
a
Preludes. I
McChicken.
bet that's
You're
just
a
like
gay man and you ordered McDonald's.
Girl, if you only knew McDonald's, Domino's, I'm celebrating Judy Garland 365.
Yeah, it was a great movie.
I slept for 2 days as well. I celebrated just like she would.
Yeah. All right. Well, America, we want to tell you tonight we are broadcasting. It's happening out and Q News tonight from our new set in the middle of the World AIDS Museum and Education Center here in Wilton Manors in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We joke that we're broadcasting from the gayest place on planet Earth, and we prove it tonight. We also want to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living, who has prepared and helped in the assistance of the creation of this new set. Let's continue in queuing up the USA in talking about the crime of doing what is right. In the testimony in the impeachment hearings in the House, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman was fired at the end of last week for testifying in impeachment. Before we tell you about that story, we've prepared this, so watch.
The US president appears to be purging impeachment witnesses from his administration. Donald Trump has ordered the recall of the US ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, effective immediately. Hours earlier, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman was escorted from the White House. The top Ukraine policy officer's brother was also removed from the building, even though he wasn't an impeachment witness.
So retaliation has begun with Alexander Vindman. Of course, a lot of us remember him through the impeachment trial, having testified with his first-hand knowledge of the alleged Ukrainian phone call between President Zelensky of Ukraine and President Donald Trump, and the misconduct that had occurred that obviously led to the 2 articles of impeachment against the president, which, of course, we all know he was later acquitted. But now that the president has been acquitted, he's essentially going on a warpath, if you will, where doing what is right is wrong in the eyes of President Trump, where anyone that has crossed him is either being fired or is being removed from the White House. So it's only just begun. So it's unfortunate that the acquittal of this president has occurred, and that, again, doing what is right has proven Zero. Zero. It's frustrating for me personally because I think at the end of the day, the American voters need to realize that we're going to have an appeals date for this, and it's going to be November 3rd,
Yes,
2020,
absolutely.
and the American people are going to be the
The
jury.
most important issue here, which I continue to argue with my conservative and Republican friends, is the president absolutely had the right to do this. No question. He had the right to do it. Whether it's right is the issue here that we're discussing, and your challenge on elected.
We're debating the morality of the President of the United States.
Exactly.
Once again.
Once again.
Yeah.
We queue up the world this evening, and we go to Switzerland. We've been reporting a lot of interesting things that are happening for the LGBT community in Switzerland. And tonight we report that Switzerland backs a critical new anti-homophobia law in a landmark public vote. We've prepared a summary of this story. Watch this.
Increased presence in the Balkans, and on Sunday it will be Switzerland who are heading to the polls in a national referendum which could criminalise any hate speech against the LGBT plus community. But what exactly is going on here? Well, let's try and break it down for you. In 2018, Switzerland expanded their existing discriminatory laws to include things like race, religion and ethnicity. This would be an expansion of that law to include sexual orientation. Now, what it would mean is that any public hate speech in a public environment, such as on the street or in a cafe, well, that would be criminalized.
Everybody, you heard it here first on Q News tonight. Switzerland has voted to expand the anti-discrimination penalty at a vote of 1.4 million to 0.8 million to include LGBTQ and sexual identity orientation in their terms of what is anti-discrimination, what is the part of the policy. The right party, the Swiss People's Party, have led that this is an argument of censorship, that they want to, people that want to pass this vote want to censor those that are looking to perpetuate whatever they're looking to perpetuate instead of the LGBTQ community. This is an open society that we're trying to state of Switzerland with acceptance for everyone. Of course, the Pink Cross of Switzerland, which is an LGBTQ organization, had over hundreds of thousands of flyers that went out, 20,000 rainbow flags that were flying. It's interesting to note, though, that Switzerland is a location, a country where there is no marriage equality, that you have to be registered partners versus actually being a same-sex couple. But now the fight is for protections, for statistics, for recording of hate crimes rather than the equality itself.
Let's get right into the nitty-gritty of what's going on in Switzerland. Switzerland was relatively conservative in LGBT rights, way late in the game compared to Britain or France or Spain. Switzerland votes in this popular election about 65%, 35% in supporting anti-homophobia institutional law. Not quite what it is in the United States, but pretty close. What do you make of the statistics of the 65% of Switzerland saying, no, you can't discriminate in Switzerland? Any thoughts?
Well, I think that's wonderful to see, and I hope that we bring that here in the United States. But I also think that, and we've had this conversation before, that this is a perfect example of them going the extra mile in terms of anti-discrimination, but yet not yet legalizing marriage equality. So this is a perfect segue into the idea and concept of people tolerating a community but not accepting them.
That's true. You can have hate crimes, you can have speech that means anything, but you can get away with whatever you want. Maybe not anymore, but you can't get married in Switzerland.
Interesting. We continue in queuing up the world, and we move from Switzerland to Ireland. The Irish election that has just taken place last week shakes up the political landscape of the Sinn Fein as they top polls in Ireland, shocked really all of Ireland and Europe. We've prepared this summary of this story. Watch this.
Sinn Féin leader Mary Lou MacDonald was welcomed to the Dublin count like a hero. The left-wing nationalists fought a campaign of eye-catching pledges on housing and pensions, which caught the imagination of an electorate crying out for an alternative to the two big establishment parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael.
It's a big statement of change. It is a big statement that this is no longer a two-party system. It's a statement that people want a different type of government.
So as we just saw, Ireland had a very contentious election that saw Sinn Fein just virtually come out on top, and they don't even have enough seats in Parliament now to even make a majority to even move forward with an actual stable government. So they're likely going to have to work with Labor and the Social Democrats to form a coalition government to be able to just be able to operate in general policy. So just for some of our viewers out there, the Sinn Fein is a very, very far left-wing fraction of the political parties over in Ireland. And it's interesting because we're seeing these contentious elections between parties going on
all over the world.
All over the world. Israel, and even here in the United States right now, we're seeing this in our own Democratic primary, where you have a centrist part of the party that's so split right now, that's paving way for possibly someone who identifies himself to be a democratic socialist to be the Democratic nominee to go up against President Trump on November 3rd of 2020.
Very interesting. And I see lots of parallels in what just happened in Ireland to a conservative and a liberal party, Republican and Democrat, and then a more fringed, considered liberal party, socialist party, which is definitely what Sinn Fein would be reflected in Ireland, and a split in the liberal democratic positioning in Ireland for the first time ever.
Yes.
I wonder if this trend might be something that we are already starting to watch in the United States. We continue to queue up entertainment, and we move to RuPaul. RuPaul on Saturday night hosted SNL this week. As you know, we ask you, what did you think about what happened at Saturday Night Live? Before we talk about that, let us show you a little of what happened. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's talk about what happened at Saturday Night Live. What did y'all think?
All right, so obviously this is the first time, well, maybe not obvious, but this is the first time that a drag queen has ever hosted SNL. I almost said that a drag queen has ever hosted RuPaul's Drag Race, because RuPaul made it clear while he was hosting this week that his name is synonymous with RuPaul's Drag Race, that the anchor of RuPaul's Drag Race is bigger than anything that happens in the community, and that it's known as a stakeholding as a stakeholder in the LGBT community. Some of RuPaul's skits, the one that we see pictured right now, it was one where he was saying this is the next big super drag queen of the world, obviously harnessing the power of Pete Davidson, which is incredible. And this is one of the few skits where he was able to actually be in drag and have the entire illusion because it was pre-recorded. Some other skits of note were a library scene where he had children reading in the library, reading, of course, being throwing shade or being a little bit aggressive toward other people in the community, and his opening monologue, which was a little bit more of a pep talk and in the vein of, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else? And RuPaul gives his amen.
Did you watch?
I did watch, and I've got to say, RuPaul is fantastic at motivating other people.
Was RuPaul funny?
RuPaul and the team at SNL...
Wait, let me tee that up one more time. Was RuPaul funny?
They have an incredible way of making sure that you know exactly what to say, because RuPaul was the first drag queen to host. She had a library sketch which featured children, a pep talk monologue, and
RuPaul funny?
I had a good time watching RuPaul on SNL.
Right, so you enjoyed it. Have you watched Saturday Night Live yet?
I did.
Yes,
I did.
and same question: was RuPaul funny?
Not particularly. I found it.
And we all love RuPaul.
We all love RuPaul, and we all know this. And I say this with lots of love, but unfortunately, I felt like a lot of the moments were very forced. I did appreciate where she was coming with trying to normalize some of the language that we have in ballroom, if you will, and voguing, in terms of the gay community and things that one often hears in terms of RuPaul's Drag Race. And normalizing that to a broader aspect of society that otherwise have probably never heard that language before. But a lot of it felt very forced, and I almost wonder had it would have been a little more comical, or I would have been more receptive had she been in drag. Yeah. Not as male, but presenting as female.
RuPaul, as opposed to RuPaul Charles.
That's part of what's so interesting about this, because SNL and American culture have a history in the past several decades of pushing drag queens, of pushing being in drag as this comedy effort, as this being less than effort. And what we're seeing here is one of the first times, if not the first time, that SNL has acknowledged that being a drag queen isn't just something of note, but it's being holy. People on this set treated RuPaul as a god. He was on one of the late night shows this past week.
Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, exactly, and was treated like, oh, I said something wrong. No, you didn't, but it doesn't matter because you're talking to RuPaul. You treat her like a god, sure, but it doesn't mean that it's sacrilege to talk to her this way. And I think that's one of the biggest manifests that we've seen in this past time, that queerness has taken on more of a colloquial term.
The bottom line here in this story is it really is a big story for an LGBT evening news show like Q News Tonight, because this is the first time ever in history that a drag queen has hosted SNL. Now that glass ceiling has been broken, we can't wait for the next one. I'm cheering for Bianca Del Rio. Let her be
Oh,
next.
wow. That would be amazing.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
She would be so good.
She would be so good.
Still.
All right. We are going to finish up tonight with an interesting news segment that has been created called The Big Finish. And The Big Finish is kind of a lightning round, faster, teeing up many of the important stories that are happening today and just some quick observations that we have. Everybody understand what we do? I have this bell here in case Aaron and Napoleon talk too much, which they frequently do in reporting their stories, but we're going to do this really quick, called The Big Finish. Question, topic, story number 1 in The Big Finish. Joe Biden called a New Hampshire voter over the weekend a lying, dog-faced pony soldier during a campaign event. Any thoughts?
This isn't the first time that we've seen him speak out against a voter, and it's not the last time. Hopefully he'll get a little bit more creative in what he has to say moving forward.
More creative than a lying, dog-faced pony soldier? That's the vice president for 8 years.
That's creative, but I think they're listening to something from like 1875. We might as well hear like the word Pollyanna or hooligan involved in it, shaking his fist as he's looking around. He's dating himself as he speaks.
Not Donald Trump. Come on. Any thoughts?
Fortunately.
Oh, I think this is a perfect example of why Joe Biden is slipping in the polls and he's not doing well. He is, again, as he always has been. He's his own worst enemy.
It was a desperate plea.
He's his own worst enemy.
Desperate plea, yeah. Question number 2, topic number 2 in The Big Finish. Elton John last night won an Oscar for Rocket Man's Going to Love Me Again. What do y'all think? Elton John winning the Oscar, the new song in the movie.
This was his 4th nomination, his 2nd win. He won in the 90s for Can You Feel the Love Tonight from Lion King. I thought it was wonderful.
You are so gay for knowing that right off.
I Googled it last night. Okay.
Right.
But I was very excited to see this because I want people in the LGBTQ community to be propelled and lifted.
You thought it was a big deal.
I thought it was totally a big deal.
It was a big deal?
I did think it was a big deal. And I had that same fact in my head because the whole point is that this is the same year as Lion King. His work is revolutionary, and the work of a gay man is revolutionary.
Let's move on to The Big Finish.
About that jacket, though. I could have done without that, Elton.
Story number 3. Anti-Putin blogger, a little more serious in note, has his throat slit in a hotel room after vocally opposing the Russian president. What do you think about this issue of opposing the president of Russia?
I think that's exactly what I would come to expect. I think that a slit throat is about as subtle as you could possibly be, and I'm sure we'll be seeing headlines tomorrow as to, oh, what happened? And we'll be here to answer.
This kind of violence is happening towards our LGBT brothers and sisters each and every single day. Just 2 days ago, there was a very well-known LGBT activist who was openly lesbian in Russia who was killed. So this doesn't surprise me, and I think it's very sad.
I think, personally, the 2 greatest enemies to world freedom is Putin in Russia and McConnell in Kentucky. That's my thoughts. Big Finish subject, story number 4. Madonna, ever heard of her? Madam X tour is rips. She rips on the London Palladium, a concert venue, for cutting off her concert because she went, are you ready for this? Quote unquote, past curfew time. What do y'all think?
How does somebody turn off the lights on Madonna? But I sit there and I wonder, like, oh my God, how can she see in the dark, especially with an eye patch? She's just already, like, she's got the cane and she's already moving around, right?
I'm so happy with the city for choosing to acknowledge that she's a human that has to go by the laws that they've established and not say, you're a god, just do whatever the hell you want.
Or how about that Madonna has a curfew? She's gotten so to the point in her life of, oh, we've got to put Granny in bed now. She's got a curfew.
Hey, she did hurt herself recently on her tour.
True.
She needs a rest.
The Big Finish topic, subject, story number 5. Here in South Florida, a Miami mayor spokesman resigns after admitting to a police investigation that had to do with a attempt and of a sexual experience with a minor. Any thoughts about what we watched here?
Well, I don't think you can say those words without implying that people need to Google more for more information, because obviously we have not said very much in what we have stated, and it's because we're nearby, and everything gets messy once you start dealing with the facts. You hear an accusation, even if it's true, and you know that it has a lot of implications.
Part of the big story here is there's allegations that the mayor's spokesman tried to have a sexual encounter in City Hall in Miami. The news is still
unfortunately, that would just get him to be, impeached and then not removed. So that's not too bad.
The Big Finish, subject number 6. Yes, Billy Porter was Cinderella again, as he wears a dress to the Oscars last night again. What do you think about Billy Porter?
I wish that you had some of his fashion sense.
I don't think Billy Porter's quite gay. Not as gay as Al. But, regardless of my jokes, I think it's wonderful. I love him on Pose, and I think it's great that he continues to just gender bend and wear whatever the hell he wants. It gets people talking. Obviously, we're talking about it.
All right, well, let's move on. Big Finish story number 7. Multinationals see a coronavirus red flag on the horizon, and it's a strange red flag. The United States is going to benefit through a stronger dollar. What do you think about coronavirus actually helping the United States?
It sounds just like it's in Trump's repertoire to benefit off of other people's misfortune. So I clearly anticipate us getting a massive amount of money from this outbreak.
I mean, if this is is this the United States government that's trying to propel this notion?
No. Lots of countries and lots of political leaders all over the world are talking about
saying that the global market's going to benefit the most because of this. Because top 2 economies in the United States and China, perhaps. But I think it's very early to see how this continues to play out.
The Big Finish story number 8. Rosario Dawson says it's scary dating a politician, and she talks about her relationship and a politician that she is dating. What do y'all think? Her observation. Would you want to date a politician?
Well, as the obvious candidate here that has had a couple of opportunities to date politicians, I have to say, being from Baltimore and D.C., that it is really odd to try to equate for what other people want to present themselves to be and then what they actually are. And to try to negotiate that in terms of a field, like we're on camera every day, how to make that happen.
I would say that it probably is difficult for Rosario Dawson to date a politician, especially when he's pretending to be straight. It's just an observation,
My
kids.
goodness. Finally, in the Big Finish, our final topic that we talk about tonight is called Clo-mentum, where the night before the New Hampshire primary, and Amy Klobuchar was in the debate Friday night. It's reported over the weekend she raised a record since announcing $3 million over the weekend since the debate. Thoughts about Amy Klobuchar?
I'm personally excited about this. Both of you know that my candidate in the race for the Democratic primary is Amy Klobuchar. I'm a centrist Democrat. I think she's the most electable, and I think she's the only one that can beat Donald Trump, and I think that people are starting to see that.
I really hope she can beat Donald Trump because she seems to be the winning candidate that's coming up.
Well, America, that is today's news for the LGBT community on the world's first daily gay evening news show. Remember, if it's important to the LGBT community, it's important to Q News Tonight. For Aaron Darr and Napoleon Plays, I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson. We are literally at Q News Tonight, out of the closet and into the headlines. And this is Q News Tonight. Thank you, and we will see you tomorrow night as we do a special broadcast on the New Hampshire primary. Good night.